Welcome to the Self-Care Sound Mind podcast. In this space, we're going to talk about the losses we don't always have the language for. Because grief isn't only about losing someone we love. Sometimes it's the end of a relationship, a friendship that's faded, a dream that's changed, or the life we thought we'd have. In this series, we're naming all kinds of grief that often go unseen, and we're going to learn how to move through them with compassion. On tonight's episode, we'll be discussing grieving the parent you never had with Dr. Stacey Heath, DSW. Like, share, tag a friend, and let them know that the Self-Care Sound Mind podcast is live and you don't want to miss this conversation. Hello, everyone. I am Kiera Moore here with another episode of the Self-Care Sound Mind podcast. And I am so excited to have another wonderful conversation about grief. And not just grief in the way that we usually think about it, but we're going to go beyond grief in terms of death. And we're going to talk about areas of our lives where we are experiencing grief, but don't usually get validated. So grief, it just isn't about losing someone you love. Sometimes it's the end of a relationship, a friendship that's faded, a dream that had to change, or the life that we thought we'd have. And so we're looking at these different types of grief and not just talking about it, but we are going to talk about what to do with these feelings. And tonight is another wonderful episode. Super excited to talk about grieving the parent we never had. And I'm going to do this with my fair friend and colleague, Dr. Stacey Heath. So we're going to welcome Dr. Stacey. The good doctor is in the building.
Hi, Kiera. Hello.
How are you?
I am good. I can't complain. How are you?
I'm good. I'm super excited to have you here. Tell everyone who you are, what you do, all the big things going on in your life.
Sure. I'm super excited to be here too. My name is Dr. Stacey Heath. I am a doctorate of social work. I am a licensed clinician social worker. I guess I'll say by day, I am director of clinical services at an inpatient psychiatric facility in Delaware. And then by evening, I am a clinician working in the wonderful Embracing Oak Therapy.
You have such a great law. So I'm super excited, not only to have you on my team, but also to have this conversation with you because you are the expert when it comes to this, giving your doctoral research. So I could thought of nobody better to have this conversation with. And I know that we could talk both personal and professional. And working with kids, I have found that they are extremely neglected when it comes to being supported with grief. And so many times they're dealing with things that are not necessarily recognized. And one of those things, and I'll just jump right into it. Actually, no, I'm going to backtrack because I don't want to, I want to do the topic justice. In our last episode, we talked about, we began talking about like the emotional absence and the result of that from like fathers, right? In terms of men and how they grieve. But going into this episode, piggybacking off from that, I want to talk about it in terms of children, right? Because that's how it starts. Yes. That loss or feeling that separation, sometimes whether it's an intentional abandonment or unintentional, it feels the same, right?
Absolutely.
So when we talk about like childhood emotional neglect, that can come for so many different reasons.
Absolutely.
Well, what can you talk to us about, just, you can give us your general overview, or we could go into the childhood emotional neglect.
Yeah, so I think that's a great question. And I think the first thing I would say is, to your point, that level of neglect or abandonment, be it intentional because the parents needed to separate and, decided that maybe parenting wasn't the journey for them, or just unintentional and due to some trauma or some other circumstance that led the child to not be in the biological home. Um, but the impact is no different, right?
Right.
Not being with your biological family, especially if you really understand that and you know that, because there are some children living in the world. And they're not always aware that they're not living with their biological family. And I've heard them say things like, I've always felt disconnected and I couldn't quite put my finger on it, right? But I think so that's evidence that feeling that disconnection is there.
Yeah.
Regardless. I know through the course of my research, and my dissertation was all about building program for foster care youth, and just in those numbers alone, it's like 20,000 young people a year that go through the foster care system. And so these are 20,000 children that are being disconnected from their biological and nuclear family system.
And let's just take a moment to even just experience
Right.
that. 20,000
Yes, 20,000 children a year.
a year.
A year. So in a 365-day calendar, you have 20,000 children that are living this experience and having that. And that will be an experience that will stay with them for the duration of their lives, and it will have impact, and it will contribute to how they connect, how they feel connected to others.
Exactly. And I was gonna say, like, when I hear that, I don't just think about, 20,000 children, hearing that, 20,000 children a year. When I hear that, I also think about the 20,000 possible adults
Yes.
who are now, or adolescents into young adults, navigating life with a severed connection.
Yes.
Trying to figure out how to connect, because life is about connecting.
Right. Connecting, trusting, building relationship. All of those things are impacted. And depending on when that relationship was severed and how was it repaired? Was it repaired with that biological family, with that mom, with that dad? Or was it repaired with an external family, right? Where you had
Or was it repaired at all?
Or was it repaired at all? Absolutely.
So it's interesting how that works, right? Where we have this idea, and I don't disagree with the statement, but I feel like it's been somewhat, I'll say, misused. I was going to say abused, but I'll say misused to be a little nicer. But when you think about this whole statement, and working in the school system for 7 years, I heard it a lot. Children are resilient. Children are resilient. Children are resilient. Yes, to an extent.
To an extent.
Right? Like, resilience doesn't mean that they're not
impacted. Right? Resilience doesn't take away the impact. Resilience, and when I think about resilience, I think about it from that perspective, right? Children are more adaptable. So they go into environments, and if you say, hey, this is your new environment, it's easier for a child to learn new things. So they learn how to adapt into a new family structure. They learn how to adapt to new schools. They learn how to adapt to new neighborhoods, new environments, right? And so is it that we're seeing resilience, or are we just seeing children adapting to their new environment and learning to navigate that?
And adapting also looks different depending on how long you were with the beginning, right? So like a 2-year-old might adapt much better than a 10-year-old.
Well, maybe not better, but different.
But differently, right?
Than a 10-year-old that in the nuclear family and then is separated, versus a 2-year-old who is learning and understanding who mom
Right.
is and how to make those connections. But then if they're taken out of the home and they are placed now with different adults, again, they will adapt and they will then adjust to that.
Right. Hmm. It's it's a sad situation that doesn't seem to have a resolution, right?
Right.
Be-
And I think there are, I think there's no concrete resolution. Part of part of a resolution, I would say, is when children are able to find loving homes,
Mhm.
and make healthy connections and build healthy relationships, with adults, with other adults when possible. I always, proudly, now that I know better, proudly stand in the fact that I'm a product of the New York City foster care system. And so I definitely had to adapt and learn how to build relationships and define family for myself. And so that's what a lot of our children have to do. And so they look at that and see resilience. And again,
Mhm.
it's adaptability, it's a desire to want to connect. So you want to figure out how to be a part of this family, how to not feel alone, how to not feel disconnected.
Mhm. And do you think that helped you? Is that what you recognize now on the other side of it, or what helped you
Absolutely.
in the moment? Like what helped you as that child?
So I often laugh. I often laugh. I see a Instagram post and it's all about social work, and it says, "I turned my trauma into a career," and then
Mhm.
it says becoming a social worker, right? And so when you presented this topic, I said, "Oh wow, yeah. How do you, parent, reparent that child in you, or make that connection?" And especially with my personal experience and professional experience working with children coming through the foster care system, I often think about that, right? So as
Mhm.
a young person, I didn't understand that. I understood what it meant to be taken out of my family home. I understood what it meant to be placed into a new home. And I understood the expectation to operate and function as a family member. I understood the tangible requirements of that, right? Follow the
Mhm.
rules, participate in the chores, respect the adults, and they are in this parental figure. But I didn't understand what that meant as far as connection. I didn't understand what that meant as far as trust. I didn't understand what that would mean when I one day became a parent. So
Mhm.
now, many, many years later,
Yeah.
on the other side of experience and education, I understand now how that has shown up in my adult life and how I've created family for myself, how I create relationships, how I build trust and connection with others.
Do you feel like the like that innate desire to, or I guess I should ask, did you have that innate desire to just create a better life? Was that the driving force of doing better? Because there's some times where you find that you can want better but you don't do better. Do you
Absolutely,
think you're
absolutely.
looking
It's
to
a
do better?
struggle for sure. Yeah. I think there was something innate in me. I wasn't removed from the home young. I was 12, so I did have an understanding of the family, and I had an understanding of grandparents and parents and kind of family gatherings. So when I entered the foster care system, I definitely still had a innate desire to have connection, have family, have siblings, loving, having aunties and all the things. And so I think that part of me wanted healthy relationships and wanted to build relationships. But there was a part of me that wasn't trusting of how long those relationships could last. So definitely, early part of my life being very guarded, and
Mm.
definitely trying to manage and control the relationships and separate myself first before I was separated from. So I think that was driving force. And then I think in terms of wanting to succeed or wanting to do better, there's a part that wants to feel valued,
Mhm.
right? And so wanting to be like, I'm not a burden, I know I'm in this space, but look, like I can cooperate, I can be a good student, like I can get a job, like I can hold my own. So me being here is not a problem, right? Like I'm not going to create a burden for you. So I think some of that also drove my I guess like my motivation to stay accomplishing something, doing something, to just always show that I wasn't being a burden.
Now, in my conversation with Pat last week, we talked about fatherhood and grief in terms of that. And he talked about not having a father. And I asked him, was he ever able to, or did he ever grieve that loss? Like, I know we think about it or we acknowledge it, but do you ever find yourself feeling the grief of what you didn't have, especially in terms of once you become a parent?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. So I'll take that kind of in two parts. So I think no, I would say no. I know that I've never grieved that. I don't even think until very recently understanding that that was something I needed to grieve.
Mm.
I think I was I adapted,
Mm-hmm.
right, to not having that, and then later on in life when I was able to have connection with my biological parents, then I adapted to that, and then they passed on, and then I adapted to that, but never thinking about the grief from the perspective of me, like grieving not having them as parents and kind of going on this life journey with me. And I think I would say most people probably don't.
Right.
I think having a parent, becoming a parent, doesn't necessarily trigger the grief, but it definitely triggers the thoughts, and you start to think about, I want to do things differently.
Mm-hmm.
And what I learned is that the things that I wanted to do differently were probably the things I should have grieved, because those were the things I honed in on as a parent and kind of doubled down on. And now my child is 19 years old. And so um, understanding that that's why I parented that way. That's why I leaned in
Yeah.
on certain aspects of parenting, because that was the little girl in me that wanted to be parented that way. So I made an assumption
You,
that she
you,
needed to be parented that
yeah.
way. Yeah.
You parented the part of you that needed.
Yeah.
You parented the way that you needed to be
To be
parented, and that's a huge part of this. And the reason why it was so important for me to have this conversation is to allow people time to think about it, number
Mhm.
one, and to also give them permission, because sometimes we feel like we need it. So, like, here is your permission to stop and say, that wasn't okay,
Yeah.
right? And that it hurts. I
Mhm.
feel something, whether it's pain or just acknowledging the
That
sense
there's
of
something,
loss.
there's a void,
Right.
there's something that you feel, and most likely still feel disconnected from.
Because even though there's this idea of normal,
Mhm.
right? And it doesn't really matter how we define family and what
Right.
that looks like. When the nature of it is that you think you're born into this idea of mother father,
Yep.
right?
Sibling, grandparent. Yep.
Right, these are
Your
your
pillars,
biological
your
connection,
core. Yes.
right? This is where your attachment styles created. This
Absolutely.
is where you how you think of the world, right, in terms of safety,
Mhm.
comes from that biological attachment. And so
Absolutely.
when that attachment is severed, um there is a loss of safety.
Absolutely.
It
This
and
def-
it and it might show up in different ways,
Mhm.
right? It might look different, and we might even be able to logically understand why that separation happened.
Right.
But it doesn't take away the emotional impact. What usually happens is we're not given the opportunity,
Mhm.
or we don't have the language or even understanding of what the grief means in that term.
Right. And I think, again, as a clinician and a mental health professional, I think, we are also trained to recognize behavior sometimes, right? So we
Mm-hmm.
see a behavior, and then we're also trained to respond to the behavior, create, a coping strategy,
Yeah.
a process, create something that's going to mitigate the behavior. But unless we really dial all the way back and really dive into what's driving the behavior, what's creating the behavior, and acknowledging, and for some of us, is acknowledging that grief, acknowledging that void, that loss. So until we do that for ourselves, for our
Mm-hmm.
clients, for our children, um, we'll always just be responding to the behavior, right? And always kind of just putting a band-aid
Yep.
and highlighting the resilience and how strong you are to be able to do all these great things in spite of having a family connection. And I think affirmation and pouring into our children and pouring into ourselves is critical and it's important. However, I think you're right. We need to create the spaces that say it is okay to acknowledge that you've been able to do all these things, and that's great. However, this is a loss and this is how it impacts you, and really teach people how to grieve that loss.
Mm-hmm. I also think it's important to acknowledge that um, emotional neglect can happen even when the
When you
parents
remain in the home. Yeah.
and it really impacts your life. Um I mentioned it in other episodes, but I start every couple session with tell me how you grew up. Because
Absolutely.
that is going to, like, what did relationship look like with your parents, with their relationship together, their relationship with you, because that is going to directly impact your relationship with other people,
Yeah.
because it is our first example, right? And it might be something that we want to emulate or something we reject
One.
totally and try to be the opposite of. But either way, it's still shaping, right? It doesn't have to be the only determining factor, but it heavily shapes it. And if you're not aware of the differences, in terms of relationship and what that looks like in connection and attachment with your partner, you guys are going to be in this tug of war and have no idea.
At all times. Yeah. So I always laugh. I'm from New York, and being from New York, a terminology that was very well known amongst myself and my peers were latchkey kids, right? And so I think that looks a little different living here, as
Mhm.
you move further south. But in the north, there's a latchkey kid. Like you'd have 10, 15 kids walking home from school. Everyone had a key. And then, you get to your respective buildings and you disperse into your apartments. And we all had our variety of responsibilities and things that we did. But we essentially came home to empty homes, right? There was no
Mhm.
parents. There was no like mom waiting with cookies and like, let me sit down and help you do your homework. So I know a lot of my friends and family members, like we grew up very independent.
Mhm.
So, and again, because that attachment, there wasn't that mom that was standing at the door that we saw on TV and welcoming you into the home. And here's your afternoon snack. And, let's sit down and do homework and bedtime. That wasn't happening. And so now as an adult, I think about that. How do I attach, right? How do I see that? I'm very independent. I like
Mhm.
to be independent, right? And so how do you then blend your life with another person's life when majority of your life you've grown up to do things on your own, be in your own space, really, really have a lot of autonomy over your
Mhm.
life and your movement. And going back to the point that having your family is that first experience. So if
Mhm.
you don't have that, then you don't know how to relate to that. And then when you
Yeah.
begin to have children and have a partner, you're now learning how to share your life,
Mhm. And
right?
sometimes it can feel suffocating because there
Yes.
are people always in your space and you're used to being alone.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's funny. I always see, and when it's like, um bedroom kids are raising living room kids. So like the kids who
Uh,
came home and just went to their room and like isolated in the room, it's like the kids now, like everything's in the living room. Like everyone is in one space. Everyone is just like can you go? You
and just go,
got a room. Like you don't want to go. No, they want to be where you at.
yeah.
Like sit on your lap. Be in. I
Mhm.
used to say if my kids can get in my skin with me,
They
they'd be
would.
like, come on, like where we going today?
Mhm.
Like they would get in my skin if they
And it's
could.
funny because I have the total opposite experience of that. Like I said, my son is 19, and so um raising him, it was like I raised him around more of the family that I built for us. They weren't
Mm,
our biological family, but we definitely built a family and built our village. And now as he's gotten older, he's gotten more reclusive, so he's in his bedroom, and I'm learning to adjust to that because in my mind I'm like, no, we need to all be in the living room, we need to all like
yeah.
come out, like I need
Now
to
that
be
he's
together.
older,
Yeah,
yeah.
because something about that feels disconnected. I feel like I don't know
Mm,
what's going on behind that closed door, and I don't. Out of my own trauma, I don't want to be that parent. I want to be in the know. I want to know what's going
yeah.
on. I want to know that we're connected, right? I don't want your therapist 20 years from now helping you process my parenting. And so, but you're right. Like each
So
generation
now
brings
what you
something
see
different.
is now that he's an adult,
Hmm.
the way that although you parented in this way, now that he's adult and he's choosing to kind of seclude and be a
Yeah,
little bit more independent with himself, it's kind of like I can't control this anymore.
right. Right. And I think about as much family as I, try to keep around us and keep our village strong. But essentially, I was a single mom. And so it was him and I. And when we were in a home, he was in his room doing his thing. And I was, doing my thing. And so, again, I was showing him, unbeknownst to me, um, peace looked like just the two of us in our separate
Mm,
spaces. That's what, family came and then they left,
mm.
right? And so I watch him now as a young adult. We have events, everybody comes, and he's like, okay. And when are they going back home again? And it's like, okay, he's ready for them to go because that was what that was his experience. And so I think about that a lot now.
When you like in your experience with the um children that you've worked with or like through your research, how much do you see this need for validation? I know you had mentioned it in your own experience, but can you
Yeah,
go a bit further in
there's
that?
a big need for validation. At the facility that I currently work at, we have an adolescent unit, and the kids over there are constantly fighting for validation. You hear the stats, oh, they're attention seeking, but they want to hear you're doing well. They
Mm-hmm.
want to be acknowledged right away. They need immediate gratification. You're doing well. You're doing great. You made progress. And I noticed that when we go over as the clinical services team and we pour into them that way, and we do groups on affirmations and giving words of encouragement, words of praise, we get much better response from the kids. I think a lot of our children are growing up more isolated.
Yeah.
Um, the tablets, the phone has removed, uh, you know, removed the option of going out to play,
Mm-hmm.
and just congregating together. And
Mm-hmm.
so there's no one saying, oh, you fell, but you did a really good job. Come on, keep going.
Mm-hmm.
There's no one to say, well, it's okay if, Bobby doesn't want to be your friend today. There's six other kids in the playground.
Right.
Let's see who wants to be your friend. Who do you want to be friends with? So they constantly need to feel accepted. They
All
constantly
they see
need,
on social media is criticism and comparison.
absolutely.
So
The
when you
comparison is big. Yeah. So they need to feel like they're a part of,
mhm,
while acknowledging their unique identities, but they definitely don't want to be separated. They don't really
right.
want to feel like the odd man out. They want to connect.
And do you feel that you see even with the disconnected generation, that they're starving for connection, but they don't not understanding the importance of it. They're starved for it, like they need connection, but the connection they're getting is not the connection that like biologically they need, right? So like they want the validation from social media, and they want the validation, from words, but actual physical connection with people, like
I
trust,
think that they don't know how to
safety.
navigate that. I think
Yeah.
that they want it, and the want is, I want to feel connected. I want to feel affirmed. I want to feel a part of. I want to feel seen, valued, and heard. I think that they are starving for that.
Mm-hmm.
I think that they unfortunately don't have the skills and the understanding of how to trust one another, how to trust the adults in their lives. They don't know how to disagree
Mm-hmm.
and
Oh,
not build on hate,
that's a huge one.
frustration, right? And so they just don't have the skills to navigate and develop healthy relationships. And going back to the idea of, if they didn't see healthy relationships, if they didn't see parents having disagreements and then being able to come back and apologize to one another, if they
Mm-hmm.
didn't see parents being able to um, engage in conflict with their own siblings or their own parents
Mm.
and still being able to come back, apologize, move in love, and show what healthy relationship looks like, our children don't know that. And so they are stuck in survival mode, which means I might like you, I might want to connect with you, but I have to be cautious of you because I don't really know if you're genuine or not.
Mm.
And if I don't trust that, then I'm not going to connect, right? I'm going to be what we like to call in the therapy world a bit guarded.
Hmm. And you can't have your needs met when you've built a wall.
I just had a session last night with a client, an adult client, and he said, I would help anybody come to me and ask me for help. And he said, but I'm just really tired. And what happens when I need help? There's no one to help me. And so I said, what happens when you ask for help? Are you the person that will ask for help? And he was like, oh, absolutely not.
Well, no one's helping you because you're not asking.
Because
So
no one knows your needs.
there's that.
So I said, so let's look at just the basic difference. The people that you're helping, they see something in you that they trust, and they're
Mhm.
asking for your help, and be it, just a
Mm.
listening ear, a referral, a resource, whatever. You don't allow the people in your space to help you. And as we dug deeper in this session, it's about trust. I don't trust that if I'm vulnerable enough to ask you for help, that that's safe, that I can
Yeah.
trust that you're going to help me, right? Are you going to use that vulnerability against me?
Mhm.
And so, where do we learn how to trust, right? Because our parents, when we're young, and I would say to my son, okay, after school, we're going to go to McDonald's. He'd get in the car and he'd say, okay, it's after school. Are we going to McDonald's?
McDonald's.
And we would
Mhm.
go, right? And so he learned to trust my word. He learned to
Mhm.
trust that if I told him something, we would do that thing, right? If you don't have that, then you just grow up not trusting people's words. You grow up not knowing if, just because the person that's in that role is going to show up the way you need them to, right? Are they going to praise you in one breath and tear you down in the next?
Mm. Mm.
Right? So if you're a young person trying to navigate disconnection from family, and now you have to go in the world and define family,
Mhm.
define relationship, you're going to probably pick up a lot of those unhealthy characteristics of relationship first.
It's interesting, going back to like your biological family, or your early, um trusted adults. They teach you about these things,
Yep.
right? I love the example that you used. That's actually my exact opposite experience, where I learned to just be like, yeah, that ain't gonna happen. Like, not really. Yeah, nah,
Not today,
that's
right?
not gonna happen. But I think about this. We are in a, and don't get me wrong, there's some need, but we are in a space where boundaries, um, how can I say it without saying how I want to say it?
Just say it.
So we can misuse boundaries, right?
Absolutely.
Because the point of boundaries is a boundary is meant to stop harm, right?
Mhm.
But a boundary can't be set without a conversation, right? A healthy boundary, because
Yep.
the person has to know and understand
What the
what
boundary
the
is,
boundary
for
is,
sure.
right? Now, when boundaries are not respected after that, initial uh that initial conversation to establish a boundary to repair whatever infraction happened, right? Like, I'm trying for us to be in a good space, and I
Right.
need you to know what I need from us to help to operate in a healthy way.
Mhm.
And when they decide not to do that,
Right. Then you have to communicate that.
right? But we are in a generation that will go no contact real quick, right? And
Very true.
I I
I
am
live with the block. I blocked them. I blocked them. That's like the,
and so for
the
me
block.
it's like, I understand, right? Because we don't tolerate abuse. But at the same time, it's like, did you give them a chance to repair? Did you give them a chance to, fix whatever was broken so that we can move forward? So that's my only like caveat to that. But I see it so much where families are breaking down
Hmm.
and family members are going no contact. Not like I just live on, like, I ain't gonna lie. I don't have no beef with nobody in my family. But I wouldn't be surprised if they thought I was no contact.
Right.
Because I am just engrossed in the things that I'm doing.
Mhm.
Sometimes I feel bad. Like, I should just send out like a mass. Hey, I know you still
For sure.
exist. All the things. I hope you're well. God bless you. Love you with the love of the Lord. Right. But it's ain't no beef. And they know that.
Right.
They know that when I see them, it's all love. Right. But there are people who are intentionally like, no, you do not exist. You are
Hmm.
no longer part of my world. But that comes from a wound that wasn't repaired.
Right.
I hate to see it within nuclear families,
Hmm.
because usually there's pride,
Yep.
there's lack of accountability.
Ability. Yeah.
There are all these things that are breaking down the relationship, and they're all, let's not use general words. Many of them are fixable problems.
Right. So what I like to do when I work, with young people, just any of my clients specifically, that, like, oh, I blocked this person, or we went no contact. I always start with the question, well, what is your boundary? So a
Mm-hmm.
lot of times what I see is that, again, because we're very responsive to behaviors, which makes sense, right? That's a tangible. Have you defined your boundaries? Do you understand what your boundaries are? So, it's hard to respect the boundary if a person is constantly moving the goalposts, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I always like to back into it is, what are your boundaries? What are your non-negotiables? What are the things that you need to
Mm-hmm.
feel safe
Mm-hmm.
and present in this relationship? What do you need from that person? What do you need from yourself? Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's part of it. Is like, we first have to understand what is it that we need, and are we communicating what our needs are? A
Yeah.
lot of times I think people have their boundaries crossed because they never communicated what the boundary was, right? You're hurting, there's a wound there, this is something that you don't want to tolerate, but you haven't found the forum, the space, the courage, whatever, to communicate that to your family, to your spouse, to your friends, whoever. And so when they have this infraction,
Mm-hmm.
you're just ready for the punishment
Yes.
because you've already worked through that this is your boundary.
You've had a
Conversation
conversation
with yourself.
with yourself. It never
But
came out your head
right.
though.
And I think the other piece that I like to hone in on, that I do for myself and with my clients, is recognizing that in different stages of our lives, we have different boundaries. And it
Mm-hmm.
is okay when your boundaries change,
Yes.
right? Because 20-year-old Stacey had these set of boundaries and was okay with this. Blah 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 year old Stacey
Miss
does
Stacey.
not, right, this version of her does not. And so, and that's all based on the quality of life that I'm trying to create for
Mm-hmm.
myself, um how I've defined peace for
Mm-hmm.
myself. So I always ask my clients too, what does peace look like, right? How do you have peaceful, healthy, whole, equitable relationships? What
Mm-hmm.
does that look like for you? And until you understand what that is, your boundaries will always kind of be fluid. And then you'll be blocking and unblocking and,
Right.
contact people all day long. And that takes a lot of energy as well.
It does. And it goes back to like these wounds, right?
Mhm.
And I think that the breakdown, and so going back to like the emotionally emotional needs not being met with the
Mhm.
family that are actually present, right?
Right.
Sometimes there's a breakdown between the lived experience and being a parent, right? I definitely give my parents more grace,
Yes.
understanding that you
Yes.
do the best you can with the information you have. I also understand the stress of trying to manage everything at the
Mhm.
same time.
Mhm.
Um, and I think now, you know, if I understood things from their perspective back
Perspective.
then,
Yep.
my response might have been different.
Differently, right? And so that's a great point. I think about that. So I think that came though through my own healing, my own journey of therapy and processing, right, and understanding that, and definitely that shapes how I parent now. So with my young
Mhm.
adult, I have my son who's 19. I have my a daughter that I've adopted, and she's 19 as well. And so with them, the conversations look very different. And I say to them now, I'm overwhelmed. I'm
Mhm.
overstimulated. When I was going through my doctoral program, I said, listen, I'm here. You're going to have to tap, tap, knock, knock, and be like, Mom, this is what I need. Focus, because I am trying to manage and navigate many, many things. Because I know that as a young person growing up, and my parents, both biological and adopted, was managing many different things. And sometimes what felt very important to me felt dismissed by them. Felt, you
Lord.
know, felt like it wasn't important. And now I understand, maybe it wasn't that it wasn't important. Did they have the capacity for what was so big for me? Right.
Mhm.
And so every now and again, I grab the kids and, we'll grab something to eat, or we'll sit on the couch and I'm like, hey, let's check in, because I think I've been a little disconnected, or I think I'm sitting here with you guys and I'm way over here thinking about the paper I needed to submit or something. So I try to be cognizant of that. And I
Mhm.
encourage that with my clients, with their children too, right? Communication is key. You only know what you know, and you can't be held responsible for what you don't know, right? And so, you know when the kids are in school and you're like 100% locked in, and it's, all the schedules and all the things, they get older and you watch your lives separate. I have to say, oh no, Stacey, check back in with the kids. They're not adults, right? They're young
Mhm.
adults. They're figuring it out, but they need mom, right? And so definitely I understand that more now, being a parent
Mhm.
and understanding that the generation I come from, um, you didn't talk to your children. You talked at them, you gave them instruction, there was an expectation that they follow it. Um,
Everything was need to know.
Everything was need to know. But as soon as I tell
And
my
most
kids,
times you didn't need to know.
right, but I understand now, they do need to know because they
Yes,
need
because
to
it makes them
know.
feel safe.
Yes, they need to know um, when you're overwhelmed, when you're overstimulated, when you literally is are giving everything that you have, and you still know that there's still a need. And the other piece that I'm learning to find value in is they want to help.
Yeah.
They
And
want to help.
and they also won't internalize
Right.
things
That it's
and
them.
take things personally.
Yes.
It's so easy when someone is upset.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm overstimulated and I snap at you for calling me, immediately it's going to be, well, what did I do?
Do right.
Right?
All I did was call. Right.
All I did was I was just trying to get your attention. What did
Mm-hmm.
I do? What did I
Yep.
do? Then immediately it's like I'm I'm upset now. What did I
Yeah.
do? Or now I'm angry in response to your frustration.
Yeah.
When really it was, you know what, that was my stuff.
Stuff. Yeah. And
Yeah.
you communicate a lot of rejection. So that's another thing that I see. Like our kids feel very rejected, and
Mm,
it's that
mhm.
example right there. I something was important to me. I needed it, and I'm trying to connect with you, but you got your thing going on, and so that snap, that frustrated response, um, for that child feels
Yeah.
rejection, right? And now I feel like I'm bothering you, so I am less likely to seek you when I need some validation. So I'm
Mhm.
going to seek we'll just say the community. I'm
Mhm.
going to seek my peers, right? Because some validation that doesn't sound like screaming, agitation, irritation is better,
Yeah.
right? And so, again, I think we learn as we go. And that is how I began to parent, just to kind of bring it back. Like, that's how I'm learning to parent little Stacey.
Mhm.
Is I try to respond in a way that I wish I was responded to,
Mm.
right? So that my kids know that I'm here, I'm present, and I am absolutely giving this parenting thing everything in me, but I'm still going to make mistakes. I'm
Right.
still going to fall short, and it has nothing to do with them. We're on this journey together.
Right. I love that because it goes into that in our next point of like grieving your unmet needs. So
Mm-hmm.
you, in order to um you've acknowledged it,
Yeah.
now you're doing something about it by making sure that what you give your children is what you also needed.
Yeah. And
And
also
it's
what I give
important too to
myself.
recognize what they need, but
Yep.
it's both.
Yes. And I think also communicating to them, how do I nurture myself? Right.
Mm.
Because I'm also teaching them that I can't be everything for you. I can't.
Right.
Right. There's just some spaces where I'm gonna fall short, and you're gonna have to do a little self-preservation here, right? And take care of
Mhm.
yourself. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I can help you navigate that space. But I'm teaching them that, and I'm trying to do that for myself. And I talk to my parents in my in practice, and meeting with them, and just saying, like, that thing that you needed at 10, at 12, um give that to yourself today. Give
Mhm.
that to yourself, right?
I
It's
say it all the time. That's why I started learning how to play tennis at
Mhm.
36. That was me giving myself something I needed at a pivotal point in my
Mhm.
life where
Mhm.
it was like I need something that is going to almost like shock revive me.
Mhm.
I was not I'm like 6 months postpartum. I'm losing it all. My hair, my sanity,
Everything.
losing everything but weight.
Right.
Okay. And so,
That part. That part right there.
and so my therapist, challenged me and like what could I do? Because I was also at that time being forced to go back to work and I knew that I wasn't ready.
Mhm.
And I was being invalidated for the space that I was in emotionally.
Mhm.
But I masked it so well.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, only person who really knew. I mean, I'm open and honest, but if you don't ask me about it,
Right.
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're not going to understand. And if you're going to give me unhelpful, unsolicited advice, I'm
Right.
really
I
not
keep
going
just keep that. Yeah.
That leave. No, thank you. I'm not doing that. But my therapist knew, and she helped me, and she worked through it. And my a friend of mine, a therapist friend of mine, actually is the one who was like, she's the one who I talked to about it
Okay.
years prior, before I had my first child.
Mm.
And she was one that was like, why don't you do this? And it didn't come back to me
So
until those low moments, and my therapist saying, well, what can we do?
yeah.
And that has been like a huge help in healing that inner child, so to speak.
And I think sometimes you have to, you know, not everybody's in therapy, even though I
Right.
try to promote as much as we
Although you
can.
should be.
Right.
Embraceyourself.com. You can request an appointment
Absolutely.
today.
But I think sometimes we don't even know what we need. I think, 10 years ago, if you would have asked me the same question, I would have been like, I don't need anything. I'm good. Right. Like, I'm good. I'm here. I'm resilient. I hear that all the time when people hear my story. Oh my gosh, Stacey, you're so resilient. I don't see myself as resilient. That's not even a word that I use to describe myself. Because I just did what I knew. I didn't.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't. I wasn't trying to be resilient. I wasn't trying to be strong. I was just
trying to survive.
Right. And so I think this idea of looking at grief from these different perspectives is so needed. Because again, if we don't know what we need, how do we ask for help? How do you heal what you don't know? And if you have never thought about it, you won't know.
And that's such a hard it's such a conundrum, because when you have people who come in and they need help. It's like that. I was just laughing with my sister. I love A Different World, and that was like my comfort show. When my brother died, I watched it on repeat. Like, that was the only thing that would help me de-escalate at the end of the day. So I literally, people would come to my house, they'd be like, please, can we watch something else? No, I need Dwayne and Whitley to get me through.
I know, that's right.
But like when she's in therapy and she's like, well, how can I help you if you won't help me help you, and you do need help, right? Like, and you do need help. So it's like sometimes we don't even know how to help the therapist help us. But in that space, just having the safety of being vulnerable opens up the opportunity to figuring out where to start, right? Absolutely. And obviously that's where we as the professionals come in to kind of like ask the right questions and peel back the layers, so to speak. But it's so true. There's a little person in each of us that has some sort of wound that may not have had the permission to be healed or even to be acknowledged. And that is the point of this series that, I was done at episode 6, this episode is 10. I was done at 6 and people were like, please keep going. And the more I kind of research and look into, or even just use experiences with clients in life, there's so many areas that we don't even realize, like, what, that's grief. And it's really, your emotional response to this change that you couldn't control. Instead of being able to acknowledge it, sometimes things are so fast moving. You don't even get the space to feel, release those feelings, process them, even intellectualize them. It's kind of like you just got to keep going, because the most unfair part about life is that it never stops.
Right. And there's this need to be resilient, to be strong, right? And not to just be, and not to just experience. And so I think when you sit in that moment and you're like, well, what do I need, right? That's you learning how to trust yourself, learning how to connect with yourself, be vulnerable, and be okay knowing that you don't have to be resilient. You don't have to be strong. You can have a need and expect that need to be met.
Every day I be like, listen, right?
Exactly.
You don't have to do it all,
You
right?
don't.
Like, let me remind myself again what I
Mm-hmm.
was telling the people, right? Like,
Yep.
you don't have to do it
Do it
all.
all. Hmm.
You can't. And
Right.
the
You can't.
expectation that we should, the expectation that we should just be able to manage and get over and get through and go under and whatever, like it's not realistic if you're
No.
not going to give the real time and attention it takes to heal.
Yep. For sure.
But that's where our individual responsibility comes in, because we have to break the cycle from this collective belief that we should just be resilient. No, resilience, adaptation, healthy emotional adults come through people who work through the problem.
Problems.
Like
Yeah.
you said, it doesn't matter if we just look like we're doing okay.
Right. Yeah.
We really got to
Mhm.
do okay.
We really be doing okay.
So, any last thoughts before we go? I like to leave each episode with a reflection question that I'm going to put in the chat. But before we go, and this little time goes so
So
fast,
fast, for sure.
do you have any last thoughts you want to share?
I guess the last thing that I would share is just to encourage people to stop and take that moment to check in about what they need, and
Mhm.
trust themselves, that if they identify a need, it's okay to have it and it's okay to ask for help. Um, yeah, and just find unique, creative ways to love on yourself and give you what you crave.
Mhm. What you needed, you can give
Yes.
yourself now. It's
Mhm.
never too late to fulfill the void that you
Yeah.
once felt. Well, thank you, Dr. Heath.
Thank you so much for having me. This is amazing. I love the series, and I was so happy to be a part of it.
Well, thank you. So, the reflection question for this episode is, what did younger you desperately need to hear? And if you needed to hear the words that I love you, I see you, I value you, please know that here at Embracing Oak Therapy, we do all of those things.
Yes, we do.
We see you, we value, we hear you, and we want to help you. So if you are out there and you need someone to support you through this uncharted vulnerability that you didn't know, that you don't know how to handle, or if you need someone to hold your hand as you actually start to grieve and feel those feelings that you were never allowed to feel, go to embracing.com. And there are so many of us now who are able to help you.
Yes.
Please like, share, and comment on this episode. Let us know what you think. Follow us at Kiera More Therapeutic Services, embracingoak.com. And where can they follow you, Stacey, or find you?
They can find me, Linnell Heath, on Instagram.
All right. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you, Stacey.
Thank